As I said, Pastor Manning, let me introduce him, is going to lead us here in a discussion of the incredible potential of getting the New Orleans City Council to adopt an ethics position. Pastor Manning, I think you all know, is both the chairperson of the Greater New Orleans Interfaith Climate Coalition. He is the moderator of Justice and Beyond. He's the facilitator for the Coalition Against Death Alley and a whole lot more. So he'll be working with Monique Harden. Monique is the brains, the initial brains who got this whole ethics standard written and defended it and got it through the Ethics Review Board. And now we really have the potential of getting it passed. And I think everybody knows Monique is a legal climate warrior who fought so hard on the gas plant all the way through the appellate process, and somebody who is highly honored by all climate advocates. So Pastor Manning, you're up.
Thank you, Peter, and good afternoon, everybody. Good to see everybody and be with you on this platform. So as Peter said, just to kind of give you a little bit of background, Monique approached myself about the Greater New Orleans Interfaith Climate Coalition, also known as the GNOICC, about ensuring and going to the Ethics Review Board about tightening the constraints that have previously been on the record and on the books with the City Council and the state in terms of financial contributions that City Council members and those who are candidates to be City Council members, those contributions that they receive from entities such as Entergy, the Sewage and Water Board, and other utilities such as Cox Cable, and tightening those constraints so that they would no longer be able to receive large donations or donations almost of any kind. And so she was able to bring that to our attention at the GNOICC, and the GNOICC was then able to go to the Ethics Review Board with a recommendation that would prohibit and would make sure or ensure with a penalty that all those running for office would disclose whether or not they're receiving contributions from those entities, and if indeed, in fact, they are, they would be given 2 weeks to discontinue those contributions. And this is absolutely necessary. We've seen right now that our regulatory body, the City Council, is often being regulated by Entergy and other companies such as those and Sewage and Water Board, and it is to the detriment of everyday citizens and ratepayers and those who are most vulnerable. And so right now, I believe that it is our duty to demand that the Ethics Review Board would, they've done their job already. They have sent it on to the City Council. It is now the job of the City Council to go forward with, and I want to be very careful right now. We've just spoken with Councilman Kristen Palmer last week about her thoughts on this recommendation by the Ethics Review Board. And her thought is that there would be a resolution that would be proposed by the City Council. However, it does not need to be a resolution, because the resolution has not enough heft and not enough gravitas, if you will, that it needs to have in order for this to be enforceable. It needs to be an ordinance. It needs to be a policy change so that those who sit on City Council will no longer be able to be in the pocket of corporations like Entergy. And that is absolutely necessary at this moment. So I'm going to let Monique, are you prepared to offer some thoughts on it as well too? I don't know
Yes,
if
I
you're
am.
right. Please do. Please do it. And
Okay.
just a word of thank you to Monique and all of her hard work and those members of the Greater New Orleans Interfaith Climate Coalition, such as Jonathan Leo, that worked very hard to move this through the Ethics Review Board to City Council.
Yes, and I just want to thank Greater New Orleans Interfaith Climate Coalition for holding this discussion today and inviting me to be a part of it. And I want to walk you through some of the details leading up to the proposed legislation for the city of New Orleans and what that legislation says. So I just want to make sure that everybody's informed about the history and what we're aiming for in terms of changing city law. Okay, I'm going to share this presentation. If I can do that. Okay. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So, some of the members of Greater New Orleans Interfaith Climate Coalition might remember this presentation has been updated for the talk we're having today. But looking at it from the standpoint of strengthening ethics in the city of New Orleans and a way forward on renewable energy and equitable climate solutions, as well as other policies that are important for improving the lives of people in the city. And this is really grounded in a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King that is one of my favorites. And he said that it may be true that the law cannot change the heart, but it can restrain the heartless. And that's our mission, is to restrain the heartless with this ethics proposal. So we start from the baseline that we currently have no law in the city of New Orleans prohibiting campaign contributions to city council members, and that council members can, if they wanted to, receive money from companies like Entergy, Cox Communications that they regulate. They can also receive money from companies that are awarded contracts. And when you think about what that takes us in terms of money as influence, it brings us back to the situation we were facing when we were fighting the gas plant, where Entergy was able to push through for decades this relationship with the city council over various elections of having quote unquote a partnership. And that's code for what we mean as regulatory capture, meaning that the regulator is really bound by the regulated, and it's not the other way around. And so when you see those words coming from Entergy about having a partnership or wanting a partnership or wanting to, even after Ida, when they were threatening to leave, they were saying, oh, it looks like our partnership is now called into question with the city council. That's code for being able to have things done the way they want and not really be obligated and be held to account as a regulated company. And at the time that we were proposing this change around an ethics standard, it was right after we were able to, the Energy Future New Orleans Coalition, all the members were able to get the city council to establish the first renewable clean portfolio standard in the southeast region of the United States. And this is requiring that energy, electricity, supplied by Entergy comes from renewable sources, with the goal of reaching by the year 2050 that all sources of electricity are carbon free. So no oil, no gas, no coal. And instead we're looking at solar, a mix, a combination of solar, wind, renewable energy sources with nuclear energy. So how could we ensure implementation when over that time period, it's really vulnerable to more influence by Entergy to push back against the gains that we made earlier this year? And that's really, I think, been really more laid bare in terms of what's at stake in what we endured with Hurricane Ida that, took the lives of residents here in the city because of Entergy's power failure and setting up a very fragile and neglected energy grid. So here's the action timeline this year. On June 25th, Greater New Orleans Interfaith Climate Coalition um, submitted to the Ethics Review Board a proposal for changing the ethics code, which is part of our city law, our City of New Orleans ordinance, that would prohibit council members and candidates from accepting money from Entergy and other regulated and contracted companies. This proposal was supported by my organization, Deep South Center for Environmental Justice, the Alliance for Affordable Energy, and Energy Future New Orleans. On August 9th, the Ethics Review Board held a second meeting on the proposed ethics change to city law, and they voted unanimously to adopt it and pass it on. Now, this is a very unique role that the Ethics Review Board has under our City of New Orleans Home Rule Charter, which is to put to the City Council various changes to the ethics code. And I think this is probably the first time that any ethics review board has done this. And they did it with this particular change that I'm going to present to you in just in the next slide. And then after following their vote to pass the GNOICCC ethics change to the city council, they actually acted on that with a letter transmitting the proposed change to Councilmember Helena Moreno, who's president of the city council, and the clerk who records documents prepared and sent to the city council. So what does the ethics change provide? It's in two parts. The first part says that no city council member or candidate seeking, let me see if I can minimize this window. Oops, go back. Seeking the office of city council shall accept or otherwise receive a campaign contribution or any financial benefit of any value from Entergy, Cox Communications, or other entity that provides a utility, cable, telecommunications, or technology service that's regulated by the city council. They also can't receive campaign contributions or financial benefits from any political action committee, director, or executive staff person of a corporation or entity regulated by the city council that could be reimbursed by the regulated company or is otherwise serving as a conduit that is really from the regulated company, but it's coming through these various individuals. The same thing goes for any person, firm, or entity with a professional services contract awarded by the city council. And that also applies in the last part to those folks in that executive capacity with contracts to serve the New Orleans Sewage and Water Board. The last part of the proposed ordinance sets out that within 30 days of a qualifying deadline for elections to the city council, that there should be a requirement that each candidate submits to the Ethics Review Board as well as the City Law Department an affidavit that either affirms or denies the following. A, that acceptance of compensation or financial benefit of any value from any regulated entity by the City Council or contracted to provide a service to the City Council in the last 5 years, and or anytime they may have served on the board of a corporation or entity that is either regulated by the City Council or contracted to provide a service to the City Council. So keep in mind that this was submitted to the City Council on August 24th. 5 days later, there was Hurricane Ida. But the City Council should be hearing, and we're hoping that you will help join us in taking the lead and calling on the City Council to move forward on making this an ordinance and passing it into law. Any questions?
Yeah, maybe for a starter, Monique and Pastor Manning, we've got representatives here of the Louisiana Bucket Brigade, 350, Climate Reality, Alliance for Affordable Energy, FNO, No Waste, Louisiana, Healthy Golf, probably others. What would you want all those organizations to do to move this through the City Council?
it would be very easy lifting to send letters and make phone calls and ask for meetings. And we can also do that in coordination. So if folks want a deeper background to get more informed about this, I'm here to help. Other folks are here to help who've been part of this effort. But this is the city council needs to hear from more people in the city, especially organizations where there's constituencies and memberships, to call on them to take action on the ethics review board's recommendation.
Absolutely. I think, as much as we can do, in fact, Kristen Palmer, Councilwoman Palmer did ask in a meeting that we had with her a couple of weeks ago, are we building, doing our due diligence and making sure that each of you knows about this and rallying you to speak on it. So I think that is very appropriate that you all would write letters urging them and demanding that they take this up as soon as possible. We all know about Ida, but also to think that there are council members that do not want to move this along. So they're shuffling their feet, and this needs to be brought up before the council. As Monique said, we can coordinate, get you the information that you may need to get to them. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, I'd like to hear some other people's comments. Claire, what could the Bucket Brigade do, for example? Would this be within their scope to support this? And
I believe so. I can't speak for our president, Ann, but I believe so. We've always been supportive of FNO's efforts in behalf of clean energy, and I imagine that we will do the same. And I'll check with Ann. We have a phone call coming up, and I'll get back with Monique and Pastor Manning and any other appropriate people.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought it up. Thank you.
Yeah. And Pastor and Monique, how do you think FNO and GNOICC should coordinate to get us all informed and set up some kind of system so we're following up?
I don't know. Any recommendations on that? I think, to continue to have maybe another meeting like this, or a smaller group meeting. I know this meeting is going to cover other issues, but we'll have another meeting to assemble people who are interested in making sure that we get people to City Council to speak on it and mobilize folks to contact council members as well.
Great. And Glenn has his hand up, and then Jane.
This really needs to be done on a statewide basis, because this is not just energy. This is the essence of good government and avoidance of corruption. If you don't have this type of rule in general, we will have the reputation of Louisiana continued as one of the most corrupt states in the country, going all the way back to Huey Long. But we need to clean up, and that should be a goal throughout the state.
And Jane.
Yeah, I'm seeing a couple. So I agree with what Glenn just said. I think this is something we have to be thinking about statewide, and also because New Orleans is in the unique position of actually having the city council oversee Entergy directly. I think this is a good sort of model place to start, as we also think, as Logan said in the chat, about the Public Service Commission and how we take this on at a statewide level, because I think when it comes to at least ethics and energy, it's going to be the PSC and not the legislature that we have to be looking at, or we have to be looking at both of them. And I'm also seeing the parallels around, some of y'all may have been following this, the battle around ethics that happened with the Baton Rouge Water Board at the legislature this session, where the legislature actually passed an ethics standard that was not ethical for the members of the Baton Rouge Water Board. And the governor vetoed it, from my memory, because of how vague the wording in the bill was, and also because it basically would allow someone who was working for the regulated entity to work for its regulator. And of course, that is one of the key problems that we're facing right now. And so, and one of the things that I think we need to be preventing here. So as I'm thinking of, first of all, that means that the legislature has experience recently talking about these kinds of ethical standards at the state level. It also means that the governor's office has experience talking about these kinds of ethical standards at the state level. So if we're talking about it at that level, I think it's important, as we move beyond New Orleans. But I'm fully ready to support this. I'm also seeing, as we think about what is the legislative or regulatory, whether that's city or state level win, that we are going to be looking at and trying to take on, because we are about to have literally the fight of our lives around the legislature and the Public Service Commission over the next 2 to 3 years. I think one of the wins that we're going to end up taking on is around like solar, the way that the state electrifies and the way we move toward renewable energy. And I think that this ethical standard is like a really, I don't want to say easy, because it's not easy, but it seems it's a very obvious place for us to be flexing a muscle and really organizing people around talking about energy policy. And so I'm actually really glad that we are doing this, and appreciate y'all very much.
Thank you, Jade. Andy, then Robert.
All right, I had a pop-up. Yes to everything that Jane just said. I think like the inside-outside strategy is crucial in this, that we have our insider talks and our personal visits and our advocacy group visits with legislators and with, the city council and everybody who's in charge on this. But we should also do some phone banking to get a broad coalition together and get like the broad public behind this, because anti-corruption stuff is very popular with the broad public. And I think that there's a lot of value in messaging around that.
Yeah, it really is hard to argue about why a city council person, should be taking gifts from somebody I have responsibility for. It's doesn't make for a good public argument. Robert.
Yes, that bill that Jane referred to, I read the text. It actually said, notwithstanding the rules of the ethics law. It said notwithstanding, so the legislators knew that they were violating the law. I had a friend in the Senate. He is now deceased, James Fontenot of Abbeville. He used to tell me that he didn't feel it was right even to accept a crate of oranges from Plaquemine Parish. During the Deepwater Horizon, there was a senator in Slidell that tried to get Corexit banned in state waters. I was in the Senate building when the vote was taken. There were about 5 senators who voted to outlaw a known carcinogen and poison from state waters. The others did not. As I was leaving the Senate balcony, I saw people in the lobby congratulating themselves, high fives. I thought all the senators had come out, but no, I looked back in the chamber. The senators were still there. Those were lobbyists congratulating themselves on having purchased the vote of the Senate. I totally agree with Glenn. This has got to be a statewide matter. The petroleum industry is to the legislature what Entergy is to the council. It's going to be a tough battle. David and Goliath looks easy compared to this, but I think what you all have done so far is really clear. And one last thing, we say GNOICC, that means we have church congregations. And I can't think of anything more appropriate for congregations than to support moral issues like this. So I think we can all speak to our congregations and our friends about it. Thank you for doing this, Monique.
Thank you, Robert. And so could I just suggest, I think, as I said, we have maybe 8, maybe 10 organizations represented here. Could I have a thumbs up or a wave or something if you will commit to take this back to your organization and educate them and get them on board, so we can all be responsive together as GNOICC, FNO, and the Alliance set direction and provide some direction for us. Could I have a wave, a thumbs up, anything? Okay, it looks like unanimous. Oh, and Sylvia's here, great. Okay, thank you all very much. Okay, this is just the start of this one, as you can see. And obviously the Public Service Commission would be a wonderful next target for it. What could be better? Okay, let's go on for our second part here, and that is what a disaster we've just had with Entergy. 80-mile-an-hour gusts knocked over phone transmission lines that were supposed to be good for 140 miles an hour. Thousands were without light, thousands were without cooling. It's interesting that it took Jefferson longer than New Orleans to come back, although New Orleans was terrible, I believe over a week. Jefferson was longer. River parishes down the river areas were even much longer. This is a total unmitigated disaster. And I think Logan's been right all the time, that it just did not have the resilience and it did not have the redundancy of a real distributed processing system with backups such as community solar. So Logan and Monique and then Andy are going to give us a vision going forward on what in the world we can do with Entergy.
Hey guys, I'll be honest, I'm not certain how long I have or if this order makes sense, but I'll go first. What is the time I have?
Oh, I would say, how long do you want?
You tell me.
Oh, 10 minutes apiece, whatever.
I can do 10. I can do 10. I just wanted to make sure.
Okay.
Okay. All right, I'm going to share my screen and we'll do our best. Can you see just the screen with the, does it look like it should look?
It looks great.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about the people side of the utility system today. For about 100 years, the utility system, the electric grid, the electric system was built by utilities with utility growth and business models in mind, and with a very specific kind of structure, which is large centralized electricity generation carried by large transmission, which Andy will describe and do a great job about in a bit, that steps down to smaller distribution lines, which is much lower level voltage power, and then goes to people's homes, right? So we've got what we call the supply end, which is the utility, generation, transmission, distribution, your home. And then we've got the demand end, or what I call the people side, which is homes and businesses, you know, where people live, work, play, worship, and how they live their lives. So pre-IDA, of course, the Energy Future New Orleans Coalition for a couple of years was working really hard to encourage the city council to think about clean energy and renewable portfolio standards in a different way, in a people-centered way. And not just because, although most certainly because, that is our mission, but also because it gets to many more solutions than just how do we reduce emissions. So if we move to thinking, not entirely, but in part about where people are, rather than just thinking about the system in the way that we've always done, then what we get is solutions that improve health and safety, can encourage wealth building and community ownership, energy democracy, more affordable housing because of our energy system, energy burden reductions, and reduce emissions, and, by the way, reduce grid demand and costs. Now, I want to be 100% clear. I'm not saying that 100% of our electricity needs to be generated where it's used. I'm not even saying necessarily it's 50%, because as Andy will describe, transmission is such an important piece of this, and large renewable generation, that is large wind farms, large solar farms, because of the very low cost that can provide. But what I'm talking about is the kind of other benefits and resilience benefits, the kind of two sides of the climate coin, right? You've got the mitigation, which is your reduction of emissions, and then you've got your adaptation. And because what we know from the IPCC reports is we've got warming built in. And we know that it's, even if we shut off all the taps today, and by taps, I mean greenhouse gas emissions, we've got warming built in, and we've got extreme weather events coming for the next decades. And so that means we need to be thinking about, how do we protect life, health, and safety first? How do we protect people? And then how do we build an energy system that puts them first? And by them, I mean you and us and all of us. So I've put together some ideas and some examples about why and how this could work. Because IDA is on all of our minds, I wanted to put forward this article that came out post IDA. You may have heard that there's a multifamily housing project that was built here in New Orleans, intended largely for veterans. And it was built with solar and energy storage, that's a battery backup system, and energy efficiency. And the purpose was to make sure not only that people are comfortable year round, have lower energy burdens, but then also are able to withstand major storms. Now, the folks who lived in this building had what they needed to ride through and manage the impact of IDA. And the folks who lived in this building didn't see themselves standing in gas lines waiting for gasoline to run dangerous gas generators that wound up killing people and putting folks in the hospital. The folks who lived in this building had refrigeration to keep their medications cool. The folks who lived in this building had electricity to keep their CPAP machines running. And so thinking about why resilience is so much more than just, when I say resilience, I don't mean people, I mean systems. And why this is so important is it is about life, health, and safety. And we have the solutions now. So I'm gonna move on to another one. So the Texas outage that we saw that happened last year, New Orleans actually experienced it too with the Mardi Gras Day outages. The extreme cold really impacted the larger generation system. It was the generation that was really deeply the problem. And so lots of people have come forward saying, well, we need to winterize big power plants. The American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy said, actually, if we think about the people side, the customer side, the demand side, we could solve this at a 39% less costly rate than winterizing power plants and solving it in that way. And the solutions they put forward are transitioning to heat pump heating and heat pump water heaters. It's a different kind of an HVAC system than we typically use, but it's electrified. Insulation, weatherization, smart thermostat control, making sure that we're no longer using incandescent light bulbs in the US, and managing electric vehicles even. And so what we're seeing here is we know that we're going to have more outages, but we also know that there are cheaper ways to try and reduce the impacts of the outages and the likelihood of the outages. If you've got a more energy efficient home, you can weather in place when the power goes out for longer. It's about life, health, and safety, and energy efficiency and benefits that come to you year round because of it. Here's another example. It's very New Orleans specific. New Orleans has the worst heat island effect in the country. And as you might imagine, that heat island effect most impacts the folks who have the highest energy burdens and the highest rates of poverty in our city. And there can be an 18-degree difference on the hottest day of the year in New Orleans from Central City to Uptown. That's intense. And that means not only are people running their ACs, they're paying for it in their utility bills just to make it through these extreme weather conditions. And we know, because the IPCC is telling us that we've got a lot of warming baked in, that this is going to continue to get worse. And so the solutions here are, let's reduce the albedo effect. Let's install white rooftops. Let's plant trees, but let's also do distributed solar and storage to reduce the energy burdens. Let's do more energy efficiency. Let's make sure that people can be safe and healthy in their homes and businesses and places of worship, and try and get at both adapting and mitigating at the same time here. I'm going to talk about something here that others, I'm sure a lot of you have been hearing that others are already working on, and I just want to kind of point out. So one here is something that Together New Orleans has been developing, which is something like a community lighthouse project, which is distributed solar and energy generation at churches and community centers that can serve as distribution centers and cooling centers and charging stations and so forth when the power goes out, because we know it will. And in addition, again, bring down those energy costs year round, because unlike an emergency generator, these things work year round. And there's real benefit to folks every livelong day. Now, you may have heard that the city of New Orleans announced last week that a new initiative to install gas generators at a whole bunch of city-owned properties. That's right. They're doubling down on fossil generation in Orleans Parish. I'm putting here a recommendation. If you've driven around New Orleans and you've seen the covered basketball courts, why don't we turn those into opportunities for solar and storage, for immediate opportunities for distribution centers, for aid and so forth after, during and after storms? This is just an idea that could be a piece of the solution. But instead, what we've got is a city and administration right now going in the other direction. As Peter described, we've also got an opportunity to build wealth and reduce energy burdens and invest in energy efficiency and, oh, by the way, jobs, if we can really get community solar rolling in the city. Now, there are some barriers, but there are lots of people who are interested in it. And I'd love to speak with you guys more about some of those barriers that we need to clear to really make community solar happen. But the thing to remember is also that if we've got community solar, if we're also thinking about resilience following storms, we also need to be thinking about microgrids. And you may be aware that when the city got the NDRC, and forgive me, I don't remember what those letters stand for, but basically it's a National Resilience Award to do the Gentilly Resilience District, they got about $5.7 million to work on developing a microgrid in the Gentilly area. That money was awarded in 2016 and nothing has happened yet. And this is a huge opportunity that the city really needs to move on and could do so in concert with some community solar. So what now? People have power. I've just given you a bunch of examples about why we need to think about how people live work and play year round, and how some of these solutions can benefit our lives, especially during and after major events. One is we need to be advocating for people-centered solutions in the Governor's Climate Initiatives Task Force. You may be aware, for example, that the Governor's Initiatives Task Force next week, this coming Tuesday, is holding an event around industry-centered options, and that is about carbon capture sequestration. Now, the task force is presenting on carbon capture sequestration, and its intense focus is on how do we deal with industry. And we need to also be insisting that the task force is taking people-centered problems and solutions just as seriously. We also need to be advocating for solar and storage program incentives, and that could be woven in, for example, through the Energy Smart program, which is our existing energy efficiency program. We need to work on time of use rate structures, which is both at the Public Service Commission and the New Orleans City Council. The Louisiana legislature is going to be doling out and managing and carving up a bunch of Ida and Laura disaster funding coming soon. And we could be advocating in that legislative session for some of that money to go to people-centered resilience options. We've got the Justice 40 initiative, which is federal funding programs, and Monique might be able to talk more about that, but that needs advocacy with our federal delegation. We can have cooperative ownership models and cooperative buying power. That's another people-powered option that we could do ourselves. And then again, this microgrid support from the city of New Orleans. I'm certain I've overtaken my time, and I apologize for that, and so I will stop now.
Any quick questions for Logan? Glenn?
I don't know if this goes to Logan or Andy, but in the freeze situation that we had in Texas, when we almost lost all the transformers in Texas because of frequency problems with the transmission, would using electrical vehicles and taking energy from them have been a potential source of stabilization of the grid if it was done properly?
So there has been discussion about what they call vehicle to grid solutions. So there's kind of two ways to think about how EVs can be benefiting the grid. One is grid to vehicle, which is of course kind of what it sounds like. And so really using the power from the grid for electric vehicles in the middle of the night when it's cheaper, when the grid's not so congested and so forth. The question that you're asking, there's work being done to develop that kind of idea, but there's not been, I don't know, I haven't seen a report yet that says that we've got the opportunity yet to do that. That would require a lot of aggregation. That would require, frankly, I think a pilot could be done. If a city decided, probably the easiest way would be for either a cooperative utility or a municipal utility to decide they wanted to grow EVs and do this as a pilot. And I think that the Department of Energy's loan office would be really interested in supporting that kind of effort. But that's the kind of thing that we see is a likely solution, but not yet. I hope that answered your question.
Miss Catherine.
Thank you.
Oh, I had taken and just sent it through the, I just sent it.
Oh yeah, I see through the chat.
I see.
Yeah.
What I wanted to know, like, what is that? What is time and use rate structure and the cooperative ownership model? What kind of model is that?
So I'll do the first one. I'll do time of use rate structure first. So right now we all pay an equal amount for the kilowatt hour you pull off the grid at noon as the kilowatt hour you pull off the grid in the middle of the night. And middle of the night is the cheapest electricity, largely because people are not using as much power, but for a bunch of other reasons, partly wind, all kinds of reasons. Basically, power is cheaper in the middle of the night. And so there are opportunities to develop a rate structure that incentivizes people to not use as much power in the middle of the day, but instead shift their power usage to the evening time. So for example, running your dishwasher in the middle of the night instead of in the middle of the day, and giving you an incentive through your rate to do so. Now, I will be the first to say that that's not the right rate structure for everyone at all, because those, for example, who are home all day, that might not be the right thing. People who need cooling or electricity in the middle of the day for health reasons, it might not be the best solution. But it is a tool that we have to incentivize sort of different time of using power. And then a cooperative ownership model is something like community solar, where rather than the utility owning it and rate basing it and earning a profit on it, we could own something together and earn a profit, reduce our bills, and so forth. I don't want to use up too much time, but I hope that that was able to succinctly answer.
Yeah, it did, and that time and use rate structure, I think I've been using it a long time, because I was always taught that anything after 8 o'clock, when you wash your dishes or wash your clothes, is cheaper. But I didn't think that it was still true, because the way the rate hikes are so high.
So the fact is, what you are doing, you are benefiting the grid and everybody around you, but you're not being compensated for that, because the cost that you pay on your bill is the same, but the cost that Entergy pays is different. And so you're not benefiting from the decisions that you are making, but I mean, we are all benefiting from them, but you directly, personally, through your bill, are not benefiting. And so that's why a time of use rate structure would have to go into place from the council.
Okay, thank you. Monique, you're up.
Monique made a request. I'll let you clarify that too.
Andy's
Or maybe go next. So I'll go next.
Thank you, Andy.
I do have slides, so if I could share my screen.
Sorry. Oh, are mine off?
Yeah,
You're off. Yep.
good. So, my topic today is going to be the transmission grid, which is not something that a lot of people are familiar with, but it is something that's crucially important, as we found out during Hurricane Ida. I'm a consultant for the Energy Foundation that works on the regional transmission organization that Louisiana is a part of, and New Orleans is by extension. I'm also with 350 New Orleans, and I'm going to go into kind of how this works and why it's relevant. The grid is where we get 99% of our electricity. A lot of people don't really see it in that context. And I want to stress also that we want to increase deployment of rooftop solar and solutions like microgrids for that added resilience, especially after what happened in Hurricane Ida. And then just in the broader context of, we live in a very hurricane-prone area in South Louisiana, and it's the smart thing to do, to protect the local interests of the grid as well as the larger grid. To address decarbonization holistically as well, since it is 99% of our energy use, we really need to deal with the transmission system because there's just no way to scale things locally to the extent that we need to meet our decarbonization goals. And the map is supposed to be there. All right. So there you see it. It's the circulatory system, for our power system. And it's, just like in our bodies, we rely on this really robust system so that everything works, and it's truly this is what powers life. It's not Entergy. It's the transmission system. It's connecting to power sources across the country. And that's how we get power. And that's how we flip on the lights, listen to music, anything we use electricity for. So this is the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, or MISO for short. They are very strange animals. there are regional transmission organizations like MISO across the country. There's 7 of them. And they were created through a FERC order, that's the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, to encourage competition and also maintain reliability. Because what they were finding was that depending on utilities to build the grid by themselves, utilities were pursuing their own self-interest, their economic self-interest, and they were acting in very anti-competitive ways. So this was seen as a remedy. The purpose of these RTOs and these the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, or MISO, they have these minimum characteristics where they plan the grid every year. They come up with a plan for what kind of system fixes need to happen. And they also maintain daily operations. So they actually maintain the ability to meet power needs throughout this whole footprint of 15 states every day, as we're using our laptops right now. So, I put that at the bottom. That's kind of the theme of this presentation now. The regional grid operator has been planning for the future, and they've been planning 20, 40 years into the future, while much of the South has been stuck in the past. And the reason why I say that is that since Entergy has joined MISO, which they were prompted to do so by the Department of Justice after an antitrust investigation into Entergy Corporation, they haven't really changed the way that they plan the grid. And they were investigated specifically around their transmission system planning, as well as what was perceived to be an illegal acquisition of 2 power plants, which they had kind of starved access to the power market through the way that they build their transmission system. So one thing to note is that since Entergy has joined MISO, they haven't allowed any regional transmission lines to be planned in their territory. Now, what I mean by regional lines is these are bigger high voltage lines. And what Entergy has been focusing on instead is local transmission lines that are lower voltage. And they typically go from their power plants to your house, or from a industrial facility or something like that. But basically the stream of revenue is uninterrupted, from their power plant to your house. And there isn't broader market access or access to different power resources. The important thing to consider right now is that the cheapest resources in the world are solar and wind. So this whole planning methodology that they've been following has been starving us access to renewables as well. So that's why this fits into why competition is important for decarbonization as well. And, these decisions that are made today, as long as they keep on making bad decisions, these are 50-year assets. So they're putting up new transmission towers that are there and have created kind of a highway system that will be in place for 50 years. So we need to make sure that these are the right investments and that there is an independent assessment. And that's what MISO is supposed to be doing. So here's this is a parade of horribles that haven't been fixed since 2016. This was from MISO's transmission expansion plan from 2016, and they do a congestion study where they see places where the power just can't get through. It's congested at certain, they call them flow gates. And this is all the places where they're seeing a lot of transmission congestion and they are just not having an efficient system. This has reliability, implications as well, where if you can't get power from one place to another, you're running into situations where you can't meet the demand as well. And that played into Winter Storm Uri, when there was all these power shutoffs. Because people weren't able to get power, they had to shut off power so that, it wouldn't make the grid blow up. You'd lose transformers, all sorts of things that would be long-term problems. So here's another example of why the architecture of the grid is really bad. The way that Entergy has been planning with this local kind of way of planning they've created things called load pockets. And that's where there's just a lot of demand, but there's no way to get power into these load pockets. So what do they say as a solution? Oh, you guys need more power? Let's build a power plant. And that's exactly what happened in this one area called downstream of Gypsy, where there was a power line that was proposed that was for $73.9 million. I don't know why there's a comma in there. But instead of building this power line, which had a very positive cost to benefit ratio, 2.30, they built a 900 million plus gas plant to fulfill demand. And what happened when Hurricane Ida rolled through? They couldn't access any power from that gas plant. They couldn't turn it on because they had nowhere for that power to go because they lost their transmission routes. But they could have built that Waterford to Churchill project for a very cheap price tag and been able to send power, around Lafitte Swamp and into, all those areas and into New Orleans, the West Bank. So this has happened in Texas as well as throughout the rest of Louisiana too, because there's load pockets all across the Gulf South. But this is a very big problem, and this is a very urgent thing that we need to fix, and it only gets worse from here. So they talk a lot about costs. Stuff on there. They talk a lot about the cost of transmission whenever they're building a new power plant. It's $4 billion in just 1 year for all these storms. And what are we getting for it? We're getting the same grid that we had before. They're just rebuilding things that have been damaged. So we're not getting any like the additional benefits that we'd be getting from regional transmission projects, increased access to the market, access to other power plants when we're affected in one area. Just having that transfer capability from a power plant that's, 70 miles away would be really helpful in a situation like Hurricane Ida, things that are outside of the hurricane's impact path. So, I don't know how much more time I have on this. Can I get a time check?
I don't know, 5 minutes?
Okay, I can wrap up in 5 minutes. So, an important part of this too is not just building for reliability, but also building for access to decarbonize our grid, because, if we are building for reliability, there's nothing better than making sure that we aren't going to be constantly underwater from horrible climate-fueled disasters. So we need to transition to zero-emission energy. And that is the process that MISO is in right now with their long-range transmission planning efforts. The last time they did this was for the multi-value projects, and this was $6 billion worth of transmission projects that brought on something like 8 gigawatts of wind. I'm not going to do the conversion, but it's a lot of wind. And it's the kind of thing that is a game changer as far as meeting renewable energy goals and getting us closer and moving the needle on decarbonizing our system. It's the kind of thing that we need down in the South. So I'm not really seeing this. So basically there's a better way to spend our money on the grid. This is kind of I want to just include this so that people could visualize what the multi-value projects look like. This, like I said, it was $6 billion in investments, but the return on that investment was $18 billion in savings. And ratepayers in the North will be benefiting from these savings for the entire 50-year life of these transmission assets. So yeah, I mean, $6 billion spread over, 8 states seems like a lot, but it's about what you're getting back. I mean, we're going to be spending $4 billion on 2021 and 2020's storm impacts. And what are we getting out of it? we're getting the same exact system that we had before, and we might actually be getting rate increases for that. I do see that I have a question from Catherine.
Yeah, I hear you talking about the gas plants, and I do know gas is going up in value right now. But if it gets cold here, the gas we know will work if the power goes out. If we need to cook during a hurricane, the gas is going to work. So if you're talking about everything being electricity, and we do know that electric stoves cook horrible, how do you think we're going to be able to use less gas and more power, more electricity? I know you're trying to get away from the gas and the gas plants, but we do know, living in the South like we do, about the gas, because this is things that residents ask me all the time, you know, and a lot of them don't like the electric stoves. So what would be your suggestion?
So I don't work on the gas transmission system. This is just about gas power plants. So gas power plants create electricity.
Okay.
They transport electricity. So,
okay.
So we're talking about kind of apples and oranges here.
Right.
I have strong opinions about induction cooking, and feel I'm a super big fan of induction cooking over gas range stoves, but that's a whole other argument.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I'm understanding everything, because all of this is all new to me. So this gas plant is mostly for power of electricity.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, this is about power, just electricity power generation.
Okay, and you talked about
where it needs to go.
You're talking about the 50 years. How much longer do we have with this 50 years?
That's a good question. You know, that's something that I asked the city council. How many of our power lines are, 40 years into their investment cycle? Because those were built to a different wind rating standard too. So we could have things out there that can only withstand like 40-mile-per-hour winds mixed in there with rebuilt towers that can withstand 150-mile-per-hour winds. And
wow.
Isn't any clarity about that. And it's something that, I brought up in filings with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission too. It's like, do you guys have any plan? And is there any way to address this in planning of auditing the system and understanding what's there, and what's ready to be retired and replaced? It's up to the utilities, and it's up to Entergy, and I don't have a lot of confidence in Entergy.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Fair.
I don't want to interrupt the flow of your remarks. I'd rather ask when you finished. Would you like to continue?
Yeah, let me wrap it up. I think I got one or two. I'm just going to get to actions, because I think that, and really quick, this is kind of what it looks like. When Entergy joined MISO, I'm not alone in believing that they did this for a very specific reason, and that is to control their market. You'll see that the neighboring RTO, Southwest Power Pool, or SPP on the map, has 41 ties with their market, and there's only one contract tie with the northern part of MISO. So that gives them maximum control over their market in the South. So getting to all this stuff, and gosh, there's that X again. What can we do about this stuff? I mean, it's all horrible. Like I think I've laid out this whole problem of having Entergy control transmission planning fairly well. We'll have questions, at the end if anybody has any questions, but there is an interaction between our state commissioners as well as their city council, because their city council is a regulator of Entergy, where they can send their support for regional transmission. The problem is that they have not been doing this. They've typically been kind of, beating the drum of states' rights, and we don't want MISO telling us how to plan the energy system. That's our job, and we don't want those Northerners telling us what to do, which is, an unfortunate kind of thing to be playing into in 2021. But there it is. So this is kind of a rundown of the commissioners of all the different states that are in MISO South. These are all Entergy territory states, and they all have a role to play in telling MISO that we need transmission in the South, and we need regional lines, and we want competition. This is frankly their job, to provide, an opportunity for more affordable power and competition for Entergy, so that it makes Entergy better. It makes them compete. It makes them try new things that, allow them to compete for more efficient options, but that just hasn't been happening. And furthermore, all these commissioners have a role in supporting transmission, because MISO will not plan transmission in the South unless the commissioners signal that they want transmission in the South. It's actually part of the rules. I'm going to skip over that one, and I'm just going to kind of get to some broad ideas around, what y'all can do to support this work. I have monthly meetings every first Friday, and it's, mostly geared towards information sharing, but it is also, occasionally it turns into a strategy session, and we talk about ways that we can do outreach and ways that we can coordinate on, more creative kind of actions, letter writing or visits with commissioners, or, doing kind of a letter to MISO or something. But the goal basically right now in the next couple of years is to get regulars to be in the affirmative and to write or express openly, in meetings at MISO, to say that they absolutely want regional transmission lines in the South. Otherwise, like I said, MISO won't bother planning lines down here, and we could suffer in terms of reliability, certainly, as well as, using access to cheaper renewables, and just having a more equitable system all around, with more options. But, here's just kind of a sampling of some of the things that we've been doing in the past. We were instrumental in getting a letter of support from the Helena Moreno of the City Council of New Orleans. And, we're also doing a lot of, Zoom meetings with the commissioners down here. And I would be happy to team up with anybody who's interested in doing that as well. Because I think the important thing about really spreading this message, and I know that I'm sensitive to the fact that it gets kind of weedy for folks, is that everybody has really important perspectives on this. Environmental justice communities have very interesting perspectives on, the importance of decarbonization, and very vital perspectives on this. Consumer advocates have, very important piece of the puzzle on this as well. And climate orgs, I'm part of the environmental sector at MISO. It's important to always be messaging this at all levels, that we need to decarbonize this transmission system, and we need to do it on a distribution level, all that stuff. But yeah, I encourage anybody who's interested, please reach out to me. I would love to have you guys on the call, every first Friday at noon. And then I have a listserv too. So that's everything I have. I know I'm kind of going over probably. Any questions? Yeah, shoot.
Hello.
Hi, how's it going?
Hey, Andy, this is Sylvia. Hi, everyone.
Good to see you.
I wanted to ask, can you send that date and time that you'll be doing these meetings? Because My president of Rosedale, which we fought a lot. We still fighting with Entergy as well, with you all. But I need something to send out, and I could send to Miss Dawn because I didn't see her on this call. And I'll make sure that we send it out to a lot of the people in the East. And then I need to start making some flyers to bring more awareness.
Yeah, you got it.
Thank you. Nice seeing you too, Andy.
Yep. Rebecca.
Andy, I have a question. I'm Joe Carr. I've heard your name.
Joe, let's hold the questions until Monique's had a chance here, and then we can
Sure.
have time for questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. Okay, so I'm a batter up on this.
You're the cleanup position.
Yeah, so I'm going to just start with some questions, and y'all can raise your hand if you have heard of the following. A criminal investigation of former Sheriff Jack Strain out of St. Tammany Parish. You ever heard of that? Okay, all right. An investigation of Jason Williams, former council member, now district attorney. Okay, y'all heard of that investigation? Okay, wow. Investigations into various judges in the New Orleans metropolitan area, including St. Bernard Parish, for monies going the wrong ways in court cases and bail bonds. Okay. How many of you heard in 2011 during the President Obama's first term that Eric Holder, who was then head of the Department of Justice, opened an investigation on Entergy for anti-competition practices?
Wow.
Okay, so that happened. They opened an investigation because all of the Entergy companies were acting in a way, as Andy just laid out and Logan touched on as well, that prevented other companies from moving their electricity to communities in the South where Entergy has its customer base. So Entergy in Arkansas, Entergy Mississippi, Entergy that has parts of Texas, and Entergy Louisiana, and Entergy New Orleans. We're all in it together, preventing this competition from taking place. And what that meant was, from the standpoint of the Department of Justice, was that all of us in the South, all of us Entergy customers, were paying more for our electricity that was being sold to us from Entergy's power-based sources. Their coal, oil, and gas-fired electricity power plants and nuclear plants, as opposed to getting a cheaper electricity, including renewable energy from other sources that could be made available through the transmission to come to our communities in the South. And so with this investigation, Entergy made some concessions that they would sell off their transmission assets to other companies that would break apart the anti-competition, and that they would not maintain this kind of cabal among the various Entergy companies in the various states, Arkansas, Mississippi, Texas, Louisiana, New Orleans, but instead would leave and go to a regional transmission organization. If I got the names right, RTO. And they chose MISO, the Mid-Continent Independent System, to go to. So all of that happened in between 2011 and 2012. This understanding that Entergy, to avoid further investigation and potential for prosecution by the DOJ's antitrust division, would make these two important changes: selling off its transmission and entering the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator. What Entergy wound up doing was they did enter the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, MISO, and you heard Andy speak about the problems that are currently happening there, but they never sold off the transmission. And what the Department of Justice said in 2012 in a public announcement was that the investigation would remain open. So 8-9 years later in 2021, that investigation hasn't been closed, resolved, or ended. It's still open, and Entergy is still subject to the antitrust investigation by the Department of Justice. What Entergy, so keeping that undercover and kind of out of public view meant Entergy could really do what it does best, which is manipulate the terms for how it would conduct itself. And it's landed us in a place now where there's more eyes open. A lot of that through the pain and experience of the Hurricane Ida power failure, but also the gas plant fight. Now there's more attention in terms of what did not happen and why things did not go as they should have. So let's just go back a little bit and talk about what went wrong in terms of Entergy's steps. As part of breaking up I'm calling it a cabal, but the arrangement that was there between all of the various Entergy companies where they're swapping electricity among themselves and charging the various companies for it, that's then passed on to customers, again, at rates higher than they should be if they had open competition on the transmission system. The companies began suing each other and threatening to walk out. That would leave remaining companies in the lurch for cost, and then having disputes with their regulators. And so there's this big, giant federal case that was brought to the, not to a court of law, but to an administrative federal agency that's called the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, that sits in Washington, D.C. And so in this dispute, you have the state and governmental regulators from Arkansas, Mississippi, Texas, and Louisiana. You have our city regulatory authority as the City Council of New Orleans, and you have all of those Entergy companies. And it ends with a settlement where they all come to an agreement on what to do, okay? And the settlement meant the companies going to the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator. That's the big, giant take-home. But there were some really interesting other agreements within that settlement. And one of them was between Entergy New Orleans and the City Council, which never, ever had a dispute about anything to do with this. But there's a particular term where they come to settle and make an arrangement. You know what the arrangement was for? A new gas plant of 128 megawatts, approximately 120 megawatts at Michoud or another site in New Orleans East that would serve for peaking plant purposes. The term also said that all decisions about the gas plant would need to be resolved to the mutual satisfaction of both Entergy and the City Council on matters regarding the cost of the gas plant, whether it's feasible, whether there are other alternatives, whether or not the site is the best decision, where it would be located and built, and whether or not it would meet sound utility planning practices and regulatory standards. The City Council abdicated its authority in that settlement to share that regulatory responsibility with Entergy. And then 2 years later, we have an integrated resource plan by Entergy that says a new gas plant is needed. And 4 days after that plan comes out for a public comment, Entergy files an application for the gas plant. Now, what Entergy did when they filed that first application was they kind of veered off course from the settlement of 120 megawatts. They went for one that was 226 megawatts. And with that, we saw resolutions written by the council's advisors that the council signed off on that said, it's not the right size, it's too large. Well, larger than what exactly? It didn't really, it was never really explained because there was never any notice about the settlement agreement. It's hidden in this complicated, complex litigation in Washington, D.C. by a body and entity that we don't deal with on any regular basis called FERC. And only really the City Council, Entergy, and the City Council advisors know anything about it because they arranged it all together. And so there was never brought back to the city council in any of its resolutions or meetings, here are the terms of the agreement. What do y'all think, public? Instead, there is a settlement agreement at FERC, and we're thinking about agreeing to it. What do you say, public? Well, we've never seen the terms. We don't know what it says. And then no one shows up, and they note that there's no public comment on it, and they approve it. And so what Entergy failed to do when they put the application in for this 226 megawatt gas plant was show justification for it, because heck, they already got a deal for it. So they said, oh, in the future, there's going to be this great demand in the future for New Orleans, and we're going to want to have this gas plant because of this future demand. Notice that future demand has not been the reason that has been talked about with Ida. It was this black start in the event of a disaster. So I'll connect the dots, how we get from big future demand increase to hurricane disaster, black start later on. What Entergy didn't do was pay attention to the numbers it was putting out as the amount of the demand would increase by. So when you looked at the documents in the integrated resource plan, it was different than the numbers that was in the application for the gas plant. And so they actually showed, the gas plant showed a decreased demand in the future than the integrated resource plan did. And then what Entergy decided to do was halt the city council's proceeding on the gas plant. And when they did that, they said it was because they have even another updated projection on future demand that's even lower than that was in the gas plant application. So we see this whole justification based on future increased demand for electricity being undermined and undercut by Entergy's own documents and data. The proceeding was halted for about four months or so, and then Entergy came back with a second application. And in the second application, Entergy said, you have two choices, City Council. Go with our original 226 megawatt, that's going to cost about $230-something million for construction, or go with 128, ding, 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 sounds a lot like that earlier agreement, about 120 megawatts. Go with the 128 megawatt plant. That'll cost $210 million to construct. So how is it that 226 megawatts can cost almost like the same as 128 megawatts? Well, this 128 megawatts would have this new thing on it called Black Start. In the event of a disaster, City Council, you're going to want this equipment to get the electricity on in New Orleans. And that's what Entergy sold, and that's what the City Council wound up approving, was the 128 megawatt plant with the Black Start. Because now a new justification or claim was in the event of a disaster, you want the lights on, not future increased demand that was there in the original application and not proven up by the data. What people like Logan and other folks were saying is that it's not going to work, because the whole idea that Entergy is putting forward is that the transmission would go down in the event of the hurricane, but the distribution, the poles and wires that connect to our houses and businesses and shops and churches and schools, that would be up and running. Like, that shuts down on sunny days. There's no way in heck you're going to have big giant transmission coming down in a hurricane, and the distribution, the poles and wires are going to be up and running. That too will be down, which means that you have a gas plant with Black Start that will be of no use to anyone. That was ignored, fell on deaf ears at the City Council. And so this is where we are with Entergy. And keep in mind that in both instances, this company has used very deceptive tactics to get its way. It brought in paid actors to support the gas plant, right, in violation of all ethical standards, and abusing the rights that we have to open public meetings where people are shut out because the actors were told not to leave their seats and keep the room filled up, and that keeps people out behind the doors, real residents who had concerns and wanted to come in and speak to the council before they voted. There's also, with the transmission planning, that Entergy had an undercover consultant, someone who was posing as an independent stakeholder interested in consumer issues, and he was in the planning commissions of MISO, blocking renewable energy sourced electricity coming to markets that Entergy has under control where we live in the South. He turned out to be a former Entergy employee and current Entergy consultant. He never disclosed that. So we have a company that where breach of faith, unethical practices is the norm, not some kind of, oh, it was a one-off that paid actors, it'll never happen again. They paid this $5 million fine. The undercover consultant came after that. It came after the city council, penalized Entergy with the $5 million and ordered Entergy executives to take ethics classes. What did they learn there that would say, yeah, get an undercover consultant in the transmission planning rooms? And so I want to just make sure that everyone, clearly has this picture in terms of Entergy's actions to thwart, get around, avoid, evade, lie, whatever it takes to not sell off the transmission, to continue building more and more power plants that and lock us into electricity that doesn't work for us and creates just tremendous hardships with each monthly bill. So we have, for getting into this, it's just eyes wide open. The other thing that's really interesting about this, I just want to share with you, is that, I don't know if you're fans of The Simpsons, but I grew up on The Simpsons. And I always thought it was strange that the CEO of the nuclear plant actually lived in the town where the nuclear plant operates. Like, where is that? That doesn't happen anywhere. But it happens in New Orleans. The CEO of all the Entergy companies lives in our city in the English Turn subdivision. And it's just, it's kind of adds to so he's doing this to his own community, to his own city. So it's not just this, this corporate entity that's here in New Orleans. The person who runs all of Entergy's operations, the president and CEO of all of that, is here in New Orleans. His name is Leo Denault. So that's his name. And so where is he in terms of being held accountable about the horrible practices of this company and the hardships and pain it creates for all of us in the city? And then the last thing I just want to leave you with is that the true cost of the gas plant turns out not to be $210 million. Because what Entergy loves doing is getting tons and tons and tons of financing. And so that's another issue around banks and climate change and pollution and environmental racism that really needs to be, more attention needs to be brought to. But with the financing, it puts us all and our children and our grandchildren, for the next 30 years, paying a total of $650 million for this dinky gas-fired gas plant with black startup capability that doesn't work as Entergy claimed it would. And so there are a couple of things I just want to leave you with in terms of where attention can be brought to bear to begin to bring some correction to this. One is in calling on the city council to open up a public examination. It's called a prudence review in utility regulatory, realm. But this public examination would be something that would look at the costs that Entergy wants to charge for the gas plant. In particular, we should be looking at this, whether or not the black start capability is something we should be paying for when it doesn't work. And of course, this kind of equipment is what jumped the price or the cost of the gas plant up to that over $200 million construction cost that was on par with the original gas plant that Entergy wanted. And so the Energy Future New Orleans has filed a motion right after Hurricane Ida that called for three things: a management audit of Entergy office executive decision-making and their practices, as well as a Hurricane Ida investigation in what caused the power failure. The other thing that we asked for, the third thing, was this prudence review, an examination of the gas plant and its costs. And the city council passed resolutions giving us the first two, management audit and Hurricane Ida investigation over the power failure, but they were silent on the cost review. And we need to push for that. No one in New Orleans should be paying or should be overcharged for this gas plant that didn't work for us. And we even have, with the news of Hurricane Ida, Entergy Louisiana LLC CEO Philip May saying, "Oh, we made an additional $7.5 million off the plant pre-Ida by selling it to other customers outside of New Orleans." Does that get refunded back to us or taken off the cost of the gas plant? And then, of course, there was use of the electricity by folks outside of New Orleans, but we are being charged for that construction cost and operation of the plant here in New Orleans. So there's tremendous need for really getting out to the city council to wrest back its control over this question of the cost of the gas plant by having this examination that people around the city can have notice of and the opportunity to comment on and weigh in about. It's just, I think, a real it's beyond appalling that we are looking at basically subsidizing Entergy against the work it should be doing around climate change. So instead of moving into renewables, they can just leave us with these huge liabilities that their stockholders can continue to profit from 30 years down the road for pollution generating power that we can certainly avoid and not necessary. So that's one, a prudence review. The second one is the integrated resource plan. What is that? Integrated resource plan. Like the name, one thing I found as an attorney who works for environmental justice is that the more boring and weird a title of something is, chances are it's extremely vitally important. So integrated resource plan, don't let your eyes glaze over. This is important because it's, as Andy was talking about it and Logan about the planning, this is our local planning for how we want energy made, moved, and used. We get to decide that with these periodic, every 3 years, right, Logan? Integrated resource planning sessions where Entergy sits down with people in the community, and it's often Logan and other folks that Logan was able to get to come with her and figure out what that plan should look like. And now more than ever, we have all of the goods and all of the reasons why we should be planning in a direction that's responsive to protecting neighborhoods from power plant pollution. We should be planning in a direction that makes us more responsive to the challenges we face with climate change and the climate crisis. The cost burdens, right? What are cheaper electric services that can be done? And clearly distributed renewable energy is a clear way to go. So how can that be incorporated in the planning? And just before Hurricane Ida, one of the things that I learned from Logan was that Entergy was really holding on to being able to maintain old polluting power plants as the sources of our electricity in New Orleans beyond the years that they are expected to operate, right? And so fighting that was extremely important, and getting the city council to say, you can't continue to use those assets. We got to move that source of pollution away. Is something that we really should thank Logan for heading up and leading the way on. But there's so much more that can be done in terms of backing Entergy off of keeping us locked into dirty, polluting, costly energy. Okay.
Wow. Do we have a few questions or comments? Siobhan, then Liz, then Robert.
I was just applauding because that was so informative. Thank you so much, Monique.
Well, that was applause. Okay, great. Liz, was that applause?
Yes, it was. Thank you all so much. This has been amazing. Can't wait to get back and work on this. This is incredible. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. And Robert.
Yes, if you hear a scream in a few minutes, it's me running down Claiborne, enraged at everything that I've just heard Monique say. Thank you, Monique. And I do have a question, though, and I guess Andy would be the one to ask. Is it not preferable for us to begin to count on local, community, and regional solar, wind, and geothermal energies instead of continuing to base our hopes on these gigantic plants? And can that be done with a corporation?
I wrote something for the Alliance about, well, it was right after Hurricane Ida, about we need to get the transmission system out of Entergy's hands, because if you get a transmission only company to handle that process, they're going to go after solutions that are good for everybody. They're not going to go after solutions that are good for keeping their own power plants online anymore, because that's what they do. They build transmission. If you have a company that has transmission, they have the power lines, and they also have the power plants. What are they going to do? They're going to take the extension cord, plug it into their power plant, and then put it into your house. And they're going to just sell as much power as they possibly can and build more power plants. But so that's why it's an important thing. We'll need large scale generation just because that's how it goes. We get 99% of our electricity through the bulk power system. And we got to fix it. We got to make it more competitive. We're going to have to live with it for a while. And that's just the way that it is. But we got to do everything that we can to build as much distributed local solar and microgrids as well, just because it's smart. I mean, let's stop doing stupid things for a change. That's my overall suggestion.
Yeah. Miss Catherine, then Dr. Glenn.
This was really so much knowledge to absorb all at one time. The prudence review, the city council don't want to participate in it, but couldn't we bring that up to the forefront by either doing petitions or standing in front of them and making them give it to us as a demand? Couldn't we do that?
Absolutely, Catherine, and we must do that.
Almost a boycott.
Dr. Glenn's next.
I was wondering if Monique could address whether some of this is restraint of trade, of interstate trade, and thus a federal issue where we might possibly get through the administration some help on this, because they're restraining this not just in Louisiana, but Mississippi and Arkansas. And they're preventing other sources of energy from helping the citizens in these areas.
Right, and that's one of the things that we've been working on, is bringing people together. Energy Future New Orleans actually has some members from Arkansas in it, even though it's Energy Future New Orleans, because there's common cause and solidarity there. And so we're reaching out and doing the same for relationships that have been there, like with environmental justice organizations, energy, efficiency and renewable energy, work in both Texas and Mississippi to bring together this federal effort. But again, that integrated resource planning process is also a local way to get at this issue on transmission planning to a certain extent. And so that they can be pressed there. I think it also can be raised in terms of Entergy's failure to divest the transmission. I mean, how many utility companies are under federal investigation?
Yeah.
And so, these kinds of things can be brought into these local spaces as well.
Yeah. And Claire has her hand up, and Siobhan does.
Okay, this is a great presentation. I want to thank all of y'all. It was awesome. As usual, all three of y'all do a great job. I'm going because we got the COTA meeting at 3, but thank you all. And thank you, Pete.
Thank you, Claire. And Siobhan, maybe we'll have Siobhan be the last question, then we'll do a quick summary. Siobhan?
Yeah, so my question is, I hear like a couple of things that we can do, like calls to action. But like as my role as an academic, is there something that I can do? Like I write blog posts for the Philosophical Association. Is there something I could write for them? Maybe with either one of you guys, and then we can submit it. Or something like that. I'm trying to think of what like we could do in each of our capacities that would be helpful and bring more awareness and reach broader audiences.
What can you say? What academic institution you work for?
So I'm at Tulane University, but
A possibility would be looking at calling on, because Tulane buys electricity from Entergy, calling on Entergy to invest the transmission, calling on Entergy to, support renewable energy resources distributed across the city.
Okay, so maybe I can.
You could do like a campus-wide petition for the university to, yeah.
Yeah,
I would,
that's yeah. Oh, sorry.
yeah, I would suggest rather than calling on Entergy to divest their transmission system, call on the Public Service Commission to consider it and recommend that, because they are the ones who would be. Entergy would come up with another bad proposal like what they proposed in Mississippi, and then the commission would just reject it. But if you got the Public Service Commission and explain to them, hey, this is not working. They're not being proactive on this, and we need someone who is proactive on this, and then you could deal with them at the commission.
Siobhan, Dr. Sayed, go ahead.
Yes, if Tulane is joining, I can do the same stuff, similar stuff at Xavier and UNO and Dillard, where I have connections, and if we can collaborate with the together, like.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay.
Great. Okay, Siobhan and Sayed, one point we didn't focus very much on is that the poorer you are, the higher percentage of your income, albeit small, goes to energy costs. And Monique, isn't it like 28% at the extreme end of poverty?
That's correct. And that's like data collected by the Department of Energy. You're right, Peter. In New Orleans, low-income families pay as much as 28% of their income on a monthly electric bill from Entergy. That's huge. The national average is, I think, around 3 to 5%. And overall, half of the residents in New Orleans pay what's considered a high energy cost burden, which is anything that's over 6%.
Yeah.
And so obviously, we're well past national averages on electric costs. And I want to, on that point, just say something. One of the deceitful things that gets said is that New Orleans has the lowest electric rates in the country. And that's like saying, I sell bananas, $1 a banana. Well, how many bunches do you need? Right? And so if you need this many, so it doesn't talk about, or maybe there are additional costs because I do something special to the peel, or I add this other thing because I wrap it in a certain place. And the building where you'll be coming into, that's another charge I'll be adding to the cost. But for one banana, it's $1. And so when we hear that rate talk, it's leaving out all of the other costs that get on the bills and are allowed. They're in the riders, they're in the fuel costs that are outside of the rate. So please don't be fooled if you hear, I don't know why there's a problem with the bills because we pay the lowest rate. That's a piece of what you pay when you write that check or have it taken out of your account to Entergy.
Thank you. Okay, I think we better bring this to a close. We are wildly over schedule, but the content has been incredibly good.
Yes.
Absolutely incredibly good. And I think we have at least 5 missions here. Number 1, work with our organizations to get the New Orleans City Council ethics standard passed as developed by Monique and as advanced by the Greater New Orleans Interfaith Climate Coalition. Number two, Logan has given us a whole program of things to work with, and particularly work with the City Council and the Public Service Commission on. Number three, Andy is feeling lonely on his MISO meetings and would like everybody to join. And Glenn has become actively involved and is profiting greatly from it, and has become a great advocate for it. So I'm sure Andy is tired of being lonely his. Go ahead,
I have
Andy.
a lot of northern folks on there, and
Yeah.
few southern advocates, and
Yeah.
Mississippi. If you know people in Mississippi, that is our worst state.
Yeah.
I
Well,
know me and that's it.
yeah. Yeah, maybe Glenn
And
can-
let me just say, it's also underfunded for advocacy. So that's, got to deal with that too.
And Monique wants us to push prudence review, complete with cost accounting real hard, and get on top of the IRP. Did I miss anything, Logan? Okay, Logan.
Only thing I would say is keep something in your mind for this upcoming legislative session around getting some of that disaster funding put toward people-centered solutions.
Beautiful. Okay, listen, great session, incredible content, and a huge mission ahead of all of us. Thank you all so very much. Bye now.
Very nice, Peter.
Thank you, Joe.
Hey, Peter, quick question.
Yeah.
Where will the tape be available, the recording of this? For one thing, because I was on another meeting with Councilwoman Nguyen and State Representative Newell, I missed the first part, and I would like to make sure that both of them have access to hear this.
Yeah, Glenn has been recording. Glenn, what are your thoughts? Do you see ways to chunk this thing? You're on mute.
I was going to chop it up into 2 sections and put it on the internet because it's a discussion for the most part. I don't see the point in the last section going to 3 different ways because they all grow together.
Yeah.
It's going to be a little bit long, but I think Logan's session was could stand on its own the easiest. He wanted that a shorter session.
Well, and I was wondering about the part that I missed, the part about the ethics for the city council, and then holding it, then the next step further, holding the state legislators to be responsible as well.
I hope to put that on YouTube this week.
Okay.
And I'll try to get it on. I haven't tried to put anything into Climate Reality, but I'll try to put it there too.
Okay, if you could just kind of share where it is on when it gets to YouTube, that actually is the easiest place to share it from. Working through the Climate Reality portal is
okay.
Challenging.
I think YouTube is a good place for it, but I'll try to get them up there sometime in the next week or so.
Yeah, that would be great because it would be nice to keep talking with them as long as they're already sensitive about the discussion and keep working forward. Thanks very much.
On YouTube, it also makes it available to people to get it as a resource later on instead of just depending on their memory. Because I don't know about you, but I don't take notes.
Well, that's part of the reason why I was hoping it was recorded, but also it's easier to share with people because they don't have to be on Facebook. They don't have to be connected to Climate Reality. I really appreciate your choice of that, Dr. Glenn. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, anything else for the good of the order today?